Hello. The program that you're about to watch is presented by the Online Academy of the Integrative Law Institute at Commonweal. Thank you for joining us. Good morning, everyone. I'm Pauline Tesler, and I'm joined by my colleague, William Clements. And I want to welcome you to the first of a series of webinars presented by the Integrative Law Institute at Commonweal. And my guest, Bill Clements, is a wealth manager in San Francisco with Parallel Advisors, which is an award-winning wealth management firm that helps people plan their financial affairs so that they can live a good life and do good for others. Now, before I go further with introducing Bill, I want to ask all of you, we've had quite a remarkable response to this webinar series. I want to invite all of you to go to your chat function, the Zoom webinar chat, and let us know where it is that you're signing in from so that we can get a sense of how much of the world has joined us now. Many of you are going to be watching this webinar afterward on demand, and I want to let you know that should you have any technical difficulties, don't worry. As long as you're registered, you should be getting a link at the end of the webinar that allows you to return to it on demand and see it at your leisure. And excuse me, I'm having a technical difficulty there. I'm gonna get that light out of the middle of the screen. Okay, there we go. So, Bill Clements, well, first I guess I should introduce myself if there are some of you who haven't worked with me before. I'm Pauline Tesler. I was a co-founder of the International Academy of Collaborative Professionals and its first president. And as well as being a divorce lawyer, I have a nonprofit organization, the Integrative Law Institute at Commonweal, whose purpose is reclaiming law as a healing profession. We know that the way that most ordinary people encounter the law is when their marriages fail. And so the collaborative divorce process is at the heart of the work of the Integrative Law Institute. This series of conversations is meant to address a problem that is increasingly of concern to me, which is we have been doing collaborative practice for 30 years now. And for the most part, we've been talking to ourselves rather than to the larger community. We had to do this in order to build a worldwide network of very capable people doing this brilliant work. But when our clients discover that their marriages are ending, how do they find their professional helpers? They go to wise counselors like Bill, like their accountant, their minister, their priest, their business colleagues. Maybe they have a business lawyer, and they ask for who they should have help with their divorce from. And those people don't know we exist. Even in our own professions, most lawyers don't know about us, most financial services people don't, and most mental health professionals don't. So we've got to fix that because we're not going to change how divorce is understood and handled worldwide until we do address that problem. These conversations are intended to leave you excited and with plenty of tools for how to reach out and let the professional advisors in your community who ought to be sending their friends, relatives, and clients to collaborative professionals, to give them the information about what we do that will help them do it. Okay, now to the meat of our meeting this morning. Bill and I will talk for about half an hour, and then we're going to address your questions. And don't put those questions into the chat box, please. You'll see that there is a question and answer box quite close to your chat button. Put your questions and comments there. We really want them. And you can also upvote questions that other people have posted, and we will be able to address the ones that most people are interested in. So over to Bill. Bill, would you please let us know how it is that you became interested in collaborative divorce? And while you're doing that, I'm going to try to end, yes, I'm going to end the screen sharing. Okay, yeah,
So,
there.
first, let me say good morning, good afternoon, buenos dias, buenas tardes, good day, mates. I see from the from the chat list that we have quite an eclectic and widespread geographic group. Obviously, I'm US centric in my experience, and I'll be speaking mostly to that, but hopefully these are universal kinds of points that can be useful wherever you are. In specific answer to Pauline's question, I'm a lawyer by background who migrated into financial services 40 years ago, first as a lawyer and then eventually as the finance professional. And so I've had a long and fun career, frankly, in finance, which has been exclusively in the family private client business for the last 20 years. I got very interested in this subject originally the hard way, through the School of Hard Knocks, by being in an adversarial divorce. And my personal experience was it was just so incredibly wrong how unable, and I'm sure you've all had experiences with this, and ineffective the family law courts could be, particularly where there's some complexity, and the great waste of financial resources and emotional resources struck me very powerfully. I actually wrote a paper at the time called Divorce Law is Broken, in which I sort of did my rant. But it was around then that I discovered Pauline's work and became a real fan and disciple of the difference this can be, and have now had a very long set of experiences, both helping people get to collaborative divorce and helping them get through it all. And then obviously our main focus in life is managing people's financial security for a lifetime. And that's typically what I experience comes out of a divorce, because this tends to be a one-time kind of decision. And no matter what the age of the parties are, this is going to have an awful lot to do with how they manage the rest of their life. So there's a couple of things I'd really like to get across today. One is what I just mentioned, the extraordinary waste of capital, psychic and financial, that occurs in adversarial divorces as we see it from this side of the table. Two is really how we serve clients and how the core of financial planning, which is a really now sophisticated process driven towards financial security and peace of mind, can both be a benefit for people while they're in this process, and obviously for the rest of their lives, because it helps dictate investment policy and risk tolerance and how they're actually going to go about supporting themselves for the rest of their life.
So if I can interrupt, as I know that you're aware, in the collaborative divorce model that we teach, and that most of the people in this webinar will be doing themselves, we have a team that includes lawyers, mental health professionals, and financial neutral, who works as a resource for the clients and the team. These people the financial neutrals tend to come from the financial planning and wealth management sector of your profession. But what we're talking about today, although we really welcome people like you working on collaborative teams, what we want to focus on, and what you've told me to my great interest, is that even if people who do the work that you do are not actual collaborative divorce professionals themselves, once they become aware of what we do, we are of tremendous interest to people who do what you do. Your folks want to know about us. Can you tell us why?
Yes, for sure. I mean, obviously, and let me drop back and just paint a little picture, because I know we have people from around the world, and some of this may be slightly new. But on this side of the table, there's been a massive transformation in our industry, and it's really accelerated over the last 20, 25 years. Most people are familiar sort of with the stockbroker model, Wall Street, and all the conflicts of interest that were associated with that. Technology has really enabled the development of the registered investment advisory industry, which are professionals who have taken a stand as fiduciaries. We're regulated in the United States by the Investment Company Act of 1940, which requires us to have a fiduciary standard, of course, which all lawyers are familiar with. So it puts us in a position, and the technology has now enabled us to be in that situation where we're conflict free from our clients, and we're able to be on the same side of the table with them and helping them through all these issues. What we, of course, see, and as Pauline described, the process is whether I'm taking a client of mine or a prospective client of mine who's come to me with the issue of divorce and directing them into the collaborative community, if at all possible, for the reasons we'll explore more in depth here, or if people are coming to me because they want support as they go through the collaborative process. The financial neutrals obviously are doing an incredibly important fact-finding mission, right? They're identifying the facts. As the dean of my law school said the first day, what makes good law? And we all raised our hand and said, great lawyers, and no, good facts. So those neutrals are really critical in getting all the facts together and helping people understand exactly where they stand. We're lifetime planners, and so are often behind the scenes, collaborating with, helping, doing analysis for, supporting the attorneys as asked, supporting the financial neutrals as asked, supporting the client as asked, as they help evaluate different options, as they come to understand what does it mean. Most people come to us in these situations without a real grasp of personal finance, and they haven't been typically managing the household finances, and they haven't thought 30 or 40 or 50 years ahead through the rest of their lives. And that's a large part of where we focus. So the collaborative process enables people to work together to find solutions that can work for all, where we're dealing with the resources that we have and the future incomes we expect people to have, and from there designing a path to financial security. Because it does not matter what the level of absolute wealth is, it matters what the relative draw on that capital is. So
explain what that means, Bill, in like words of one syllable.
So it's simply a matter of the one thing we can control in our life is how much we're spending. So it's really, what is our spending policy? What is our combined income and combined financial resources allow us to spend? What kind of lifestyle can we support with that?
So that's how you would counsel a client who comes to you, whether in divorce or otherwise. But really what I would like to know from you, and I think what all of the people on this webinar would like to know is, or let me start at a slightly different way. What I've learned that as a change agent, somebody who wants to change how people do things, in this instance, how professionals in the community think about making referrals when people come to them and say, I'm getting a divorce, I'm scared. Who's a good lawyer? Because we know that the lawyers are, for the most part, the portal into the collaborative divorce process. So my question to you is, what's in it for the financial neutral who's sitting out there in his or her office and doesn't know about collaborative divorce, and somebody comes to them and their ordinary answer to the question, who's a good divorce lawyer, is that they send them to the toughest, meanest lawyer in town? How do we change that picture? What's in it for that person, him or herself? Now, I know that idealism and deep values are what drive a lot of your work, as it drives the work of almost everybody in my work as well. But we have to start with what's in it for them. Why should they pay attention if a collaborative lawyer or mental health or financial person says to them, look, you've got to change what you're doing. You don't want to send them to the toughest lawyer in town. You want to find the collaborative practice group in your community, and you always want to be sending people there first. Why should they care? Why should they listen to us?
And thank you. I think this is really the heart of the message I wanted to get across to you, which is that obviously, you know, our job on this side is to try to find the best solution for people. And I started, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, with having my own direct experience with this. And in that case, my ex-wife ended up with significantly less than I had actually offered, because she went to the nastiest lawyer, somehow got referred to the nastiest litigator she could find. And as Pauline taught me early in the game, even when you're the best litigator in the world, the outcomes for people are not good. And the damage that gets left behind emotionally, as well as the poverty of the settlement often, are really suboptimal. So from our side, we are really looking for the best outcome. And from a business standpoint, we want and need contact with you, because this is a source of business for us and a way we can both both do what we do best. It's a huge value to our clients, as you practicing folks know, and when we're going through taking somebody or supporting somebody who's going through an adversarial divorce, it's an emotional train wreck. There's incredible inefficiencies, a massive waste of capital, bad outcomes, children affected very negatively. When there's spousal support arrangements that are going to be ongoing, they're very difficult to manage. So it becomes an incredible time drag. It becomes a big waste of money as well. And we're in a position where we're dramatically better off in supporting our clients if we can get them to you, if we can get them into a collaborative scenario. Because
before you even go further, I want to stop you right there and have you elaborate. If you could compare what it's like for somebody in your line of work to work with a client who did go to the toughest lawyer in town, as compared to working with a client who's in a collaborative process. What's the difference for you as a professional and for your ability to have a satisfied client?
Most of the phone calls I get, and typically the client is the woman who's going to be in maybe 75% of the cases. And the hours on the phone are often spent in tears. They're spent in upset. Their minds are spinning. None of it makes sense. They're wrapped up in the fight over facts, or they're fighting over Aunt Mary's lamp, but they're scared. They don't know how their future is going to work, and they're very angry at their soon-to-be ex. And so there's just a massive emotional content in which we don't have a clear, calm, rational look at the money and how to sort that out. So what we're doing is we're in this incredible emotional whirlwind and being subject to ultimately somebody making a somewhat arbitrary decision potentially, or under stress. There's tremendous stress, as you've seen in your clients, no doubt, and it's hard to cognate, particularly if you're not a financial professional, on what do these outcomes mean, particularly when you're seeing this data come in when you're like, this is my last bite at the apple, and there's a tremendous amount of anxiety or stress in the system. In the collaborative cases, and I've now had the chance to do many of them over the years, we're in a much...
When you say do them, what you mean is there's a collaborative team with a neutral doing the financial services in the process, but you are on the sidelines with your client who's one of the clients going through the divorce.
Exactly, and often because I've steered them to collaborative, sometimes because they've been brought in while they're in a collaborative process, and I'm just over on the side helping them with other longer-term investment policy kinds of plans. If I had this kind of a settlement, which is where we're headed, how does that look for my future long-term? Because we do that kind of planning, obviously. Think of it as retirement planning is a simple way to grasp that. Now we're in an emotionally uncharged scenario. We're able to now calmly see how to make trade-offs that do not affect them negatively, that allow both sides to have a win. So we're in a case where I'm often speaking to this person who would be holding on as tight to everything and not really able to negotiate as well in an adversarial scenario, who can now see and strike that balance and see how giving up on certain things is to their long-term benefit, because that's a good trade for what we're trying to accomplish for them. So now we've shifted the focus from being contra another person to being looking out the windshield at the rest of their life and how their financial security is going to evolve and be taken care of. And so they don't have to fight this person in conflict they can look forward to a nice future. Was that helpful?
I think that that is exactly what we'd all want for our clients, you and we. And what you're describing is a remarkable convergence of intention, purpose, values. And I know that while we were preparing for this conversation, you mentioned at one point that because you are very good at complex business finance and complex securities issues, when you decided you weren't going to be a lawyer after all, you were wooed by Wall Street firms, and you absolutely didn't want to go that way because it wasn't about the money for you, although you're in a business that is about the money. You're a very values-driven person, and what you've told me is that if you understand the difference between stockbrokers, let's be candid, the difference between a stockbroker and somebody like you who's helping people plan their financial future, and the difference in how you're compensated as to how they're compensated, you made the decision to go in this direction as soon as it became available. It didn't exist while you were in law school. What's driving you is the same motivation that led all of us to leave the profession that we were trained for and translate what we were taught into how to be helpful to people in going through a rough passage and focusing on a better future, keeping, as you say, keeping the focus through the windshield, not the rear view mirror. So with this incredible convergence of intention, purpose, and values, what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is, you folks not only would welcome knowing about us, you need us. Is that an overstatement?
Not at all. And just for a quick primer for the legal community, and you all know how your business grows through referrals. Our business is virtually exclusively referral. I mean, advertising, for instance, makes no difference in this business. People need and want intimate, powerful, trusting. This is a business of trust. Once you've left Wall Street stockbroker land, you're in a universe of trust, and you want somebody who can help and guide you for the rest of your life. So we look to the family bar, frankly, to be a source of referrals for us, because we're looking for people who can really use our services, obviously. Similarly, we need and want the collaborative movement to survive, because that's a very powerful and much significantly better outcome for all of our people. And look, none of us wants to be involved in one of these adversarial divorces, candidly. It's just a time drag, and you're dealing with upset all day long. So there's a huge benefit to making yourself known in your area, wherever your area of practice is. And I'm sorry, can't speak authoritatively to ex-US, but to people who are providing these kinds of services, the ability to refer to each other is critical, and it's something we talk about. So in my firm, for instance, we've brought in a number of collaborative lawyers to do seminars because I have 25, 30 colleagues who are not as experienced as some of the older ones, particularly me in this case, about this. So we've had seminars in our office where we do training and how explaining to people the difference and walking them through a lot of cases and how to speak to somebody and how to try to engage both parties and how we as professionals can help direct both sides into the collaborative process. So we need you. And I think if you recognize that, you're probably getting incoming calls from people in my business. And that's why. And they're looking to see, how can I have a powerful referral connection with people I can trust to send people into, and people where I can earn the trust of your clients post your process after the therapy and the financial neutrals and the lawyers have come to a good solution. You need a handoff to somebody who's going to help them then navigate the rest of their lives. So it's a very powerful collaborative spot. And frankly, in our world, our top referral sources are CPAs, divorce lawyers, and trust and estates lawyers. That's who we like to and want to connect with.
So would you say that Well, let me ask it another way. About how often do you think that the typical person in your line of work gets asked by a client, who do I go to for my divorce?
I would say if, and this is not, I don't have a hard data on this, but I would say roughly a third of the incoming referrals we get are from the family bar. So that's a very significant number. And a third of them would be from satisfied clients. And if the longer you're around, maybe that number goes up to 50 or 60%. And then the balance are typically from CPAs and trust lawyers.
So, but looking at it from the other end of the telescope, let's look at the part of your client base who come to you in a more or less stable marriage, you might assume. We know from the data that half of all people who get married are likely to get divorced. So people who come to you married, a bunch of them are going to be experiencing the breakup of a marriage. Do they ask you who they should go to?
Almost always, because we're typically very deeply involved. We're one of the first calls that's going to happen. Typically, they've gone to a therapist or something, but at some point, if they think they're in this direction, we'll be one of the first people that hears. And that has been a blessing because I've been able to intervene in a lot of those cases to get them into the collaborative process before they get into, a fight, basically. Because most people, at least in my experience, tend to still be in pretty decent communication and are eligible for collaborative law if they're introduced early. So it's the early introduction into the process that seems to be most powerful in my experience.
Okay, so now we're going to kind of cut to the chase because we're getting close to a half an hour into our time together this morning. And when I was doing our preparatory conversations, I used the phrases wholesale and retail to try to describe what the purpose of these webinars, these conversations with thought leaders is in my mind. For me, as I think about it, what's very labor intensive is for one collaborative lawyer to make a phone call to one wealth manager and have the conversation, make a relationship, and consider referring clients to one another. It's a good thing to do, but it's very labor intensive. So what my interest is here is, you know, that the collaborative community is self-organized into local, what we call practice groups. They're voluntary associations of collaborative professionals who are going to be having cases together and who build trust relationships with one another and do best practices together. And practice groups are now doing very organized strategic outreach to the client community, people who are considering divorce. We have, for example, in California, a divorce options workshop that we offer. Most practice groups are offering it once a month, and people who are thinking about divorce come in and learn about collaborative divorce. That's retail also. That's retail at the one-to-one professional to client level. I'm interested in the wholesale level, in some big impact here. So we've got practice groups. They're organized. Every community where collaborative practice exists anywhere in the world, there are practice groups. How can a practice group, and you know about the ones around here, you know what they're like. It's mental health, financial, and legal professionals who are going to be on cases together. If they somehow make contact, make a phone call, send an email to an organization like Parallel Advisors where you work and say, we want to educate you about this amazing way of helping families go through divorce that stays entirely out of the courts and that conserves resources and uses a financial planning approach to the division of the wealth of the family during the divorce, and can take into account tax planning for the future, and can bring in a refined understanding of stock options and other sophisticated kinds of assets. How interested would Parallel Advisors be in having a practice group come in and educate all of your people about this?
And of course, we're very interested and have in fact done this. And we've done this on a number of subjects, but collaborative divorce being one of them, where all of our advisors are then invited. And so here's one little quick piece of information. It's probably just as true for you in your practice. We deal with an absolute fire hose of information because we're assessing so much market data, and particularly think of 2020 as one of the most interesting times and best times to be an investor, candidly. So we're dealing with a massive amount of data, and it's a time and motion study for us. So there's a huge benefit if a practice group, as you just described, and typically in our case, one person becomes the sort of champion and we share it with our colleagues. So this has been obviously something I've championed in my firm, but it's typical sometimes, depending on size of firm, it'll be an individual who says, I'm going to be your champion and here, bring in to describe this whole kind of process to all of my colleagues. Sometimes there's a central marketing kind of business development person who would be the most interested to then get the attention of all the advisors and to educate and train them.
How do we find the right, first of all, how do we find the equivalent of parallel advisors all over the world? In other words, there are people from so many cities and countries in this webinar and many more who are going to watch it later on demand. How do they sort through and get to the kind of people who are values driven in the way that you're describing and who are building long-term, lifelong relationships with clients? How do they find you, and how do they find the person in the firm who is going to be interested in bringing this educational message into the firm?
I don't know if there's a universal answer to that, but I will say this. I think if you get that the ground of being on this side is looking to do outreach, looking for contact with professionals where there's money in motion, where there are people who have need. So there is a need on this side. It may be a little anecdotal by country or region, and obviously adoption of collaborative is going to be higher in some regions than others. So it could be, it may not be one size fits all. But if you just understand that people are really looking to make contact with the bar in this kind of a way, and if the introduction is, if you had a one-page, this is our local collaborative law group, because you can always have a whole bunch of lawyers who need to be helped to be on both sides, right? So it's never just one person. It's a community that are committed to this form of practice. So if there can even just be a flyer that gets in. People on my side, when the problem comes up, I'll get 10 emails a month from somebody. Who's a good divorce lawyer? Where should I go? I forget what you tell me. Who's in the East Bay? Who's in the city? Who's in Marin? Whatever our little geographical areas are. Same things about CPAs and certain kinds of lawyers, or I need a business. We're getting asked for referrals all the time by our colleagues, up because it wells up either from clients or prospective clients. So we're a hotbed of needing to sort of find people we can trust, and very clearly. So if there's just even a leave behind piece there with a one pager with an explanation, this is our collaborative law group, contact us, info@collaborativepractice.houston or whatever, wherever we are, boom. I think you'd be surprised how many times that sits there, comes out of the drawer when somebody's presented with that fact pattern. And then obviously, as you develop respect for another professional and trust them with the process, you tend to get a lot of specific referrals, obviously. But at the general education wholesale level you're talking about, I think there's a lot of ground that can be made with just getting some what do we used to call that, mind share, just awareness, just a body of interest announcement. We're here, check us out. I think you'd be surprised how much it makes traction with people on our side.
So I think what I'm hearing you saying is almost anything would be welcomed by people in your field about information about what we do. But if we went about it in a much more strategic and organized and impactful way, do you see that we could make a big inroad into the wealth management industry? What we're aiming for is nothing less then changing how a whole industry thinks about the referrals that they make. We're thinking big. Is this something that you think is enough of a convergence of mutual interest that we could aim for that?
I don't think any question. I mean, I think you're looking at a transformation of the way the law is practiced to a much healthier and much more useful way. And it parallels exactly, no pun intended, what's happened in the financial advice business. This was a business that was captive to Wall Street with massive conflicts of interest, if you go back to the early 90s, because nobody could be in this business without massive mainframes and huge investment in technology. And the great revolution in software has allowed the entire independent advisor business to leapfrog Wall Street. We now have every bit as much power, computing power, information, et cetera, as anybody in a big bank or investment bank. So
in a way, what you're saying is the people with the strong values, who are the ones we want to work with, are the ones who are doing the kind of long-term, trust-based personal management with individuals that you do and that people like you do. And that's who we want to be connecting with.
Yeah, and there's no question that there's obviously still very good people in the old model too. I mean, but more and more the migration to this new model, which I think is, just in track with the way, divorce law has leapt out of the deep past into a much more effective way. That's what's happened in financial services. So you're going to find a lot of compatibility and similar values because it's fiduciary based, it's end client result based. And once you're on the same side of the table with the client, it's a dramatically healthier and more fun business to be in.
Well, I'm going to say that that's a good place for us to stop for a minute. I'm going to do a screen share so that our friends can see some information, some resources that you provided for us, Bill. And let's see if I can, that's not what I want. That's the one I want. Bill, if you would just for a minute, please, because we are getting low on time. If you could, oh no, where did my screen go? I don't know. If you could talk a little bit about what is on that resource sheet.
Yeah, so very quickly, these are just some links in some different areas and quick Google searches wherever you live, whatever country you are in. The Financial Planning Association is I hope that didn't interfere here. I've just got some kind of software warning. The newsletters are US centric, obviously, as all these things are, but under the subject of wealth advisor, retirement planning, or conferences, you're going to find a wealth of information and places where you can send communications, you can send papers, you can see lists of folks. If you just Google registered investment advisors in the States in your area, you're going to get a great big long list of people. So there are specific, these organizations and a lot of blogs and newsletters that are constantly looking for content that would be very interesting, in getting your local content, I'm sure, so that's a broader, more wholesale reach as Pauline described.
Okay. So you can take a screenshot of what you're looking at, or when you get the link to the on-demand webinar, you'll be able to find it there. I had tried to put it in the webinar as materials, and I wasn't able to master that level of Zoom webinar presentation yet, so maybe next time. I'm going to stop the sharing now and go back to Bill. We've got some questions. The first question is a very good one, which is, how do you upvote a question? And the answer is, I have no idea. I thought that
you did. You succeeded with the upload. Your question got through. So just do it again, Concetta.
Well, I do not know how you upvote a question. Next time, perhaps upvote. I don't know, but I'll figure it out for next time. So let's see. Mariana Barstead asks, don't you think, Bill, that there's a gender issue in the search for collaborative lawyers, especially when we talk about finance?
Yes, and there's a gender issue everywhere. We have been extremely successful in recruiting women, young women advisors, for instance, and many of them really like to focus in this area for personal reasons. But I've been with collaborative lawyers of both genders. I prefer the women. I think they're better, but that's just anecdotal. So I don't know. I've certainly been once somebody's committed to this process, male or female, I've found them to be typically very, very useful to work with and very helpful. So it hasn't been an issue in my experience, and I think they're both equally capable on the finance side. And then obviously the financial neutrals come in all flavors, and so do the marital therapists. So I haven't really noticed anything in that side. We on our side have a very active initiative to recruit, train women of color, men of color. We want our firm to look as diverse as the population we serve. So I'm sure that's an ongoing trend, and the events of this year are probably only accelerating it. I hope that's responsive to your question. Just because of time, I'm going to jump to Doug's if I can. I think everybody can see that. On the referral question, there's a couple of questions in here, but yes, Doug, I agree with your premise, which is if you're in the business of managing lifetime wealth for people, you don't want to be the neutral, because that's typically just an hourly event, and it's not how we're best organized to use our time, since we're investment professionals and are actually doing the investing for people. But at the same time, as I've mentioned earlier, we stand on the outside to be called on as needed, often by more than one person, more than one professional in that process who may have a question, and obviously the clients as well. So how can lawyers interest wealth managers in participating? I hope I've been responsive, but it is around the shared commitment to a quality outcome for the person, where there is just major compatibility between us. And I think that's where you'll find people on our side really want to get their clients and prospective clients to you, and are thrilled to be able to work with people who are coming out of the collaborative or coming from the collaborative process. I hope that's responsive.
Thanks for that one, Bill. I'm going to jump to Tasha Bevan-Stewart's question from England. Thank you for the praise, Tasha. I'm glad you're enjoying the webinar. In England, we have a lot of conversations about how clients view the cost of collaborative law process. Well, everywhere where we have collaborative practice, clients worry about this, and professionals are troubled about how to respond. And we have a lot of trainings and workshops that help teach people effective ways of answering that question. But I want Bill to respond about how you explain to clients, your clients, Bill, when you're referring them to us, how do you explain to them the value proposition that they're going to spend less money and get more for their money with what we do than with going to court? We don't like to talk about it, Tasha, as a cheaper option, but rather as a value-based option. But how do you do it, Bill?
Well, of course, once you've done it a lot of times, you tend to just speak with a lot of authority and certainty about it, yeah, because you have so much direct personal experience. But essentially I say, whoa, stop right here. Before you take another step, you have to examine the collaborative option. And we need to have your husband or wife in this conversation as well. You'll have to, this is my assertion, but I'll prove it to you. The cost emotionally is dramatically less. I guarantee that. The cost financially is almost invariably dramatically less, even though you're hiring more professionals than you might. Court time is unbelievably expensive. It's the last thing you want to be, and it's also incredibly inefficient. Most of these people have never been in litigation, and they don't understand why things settle on the courthouse steps, because decisions are way too arbitrary and they're not customized and crafted for the best outcome for people. It's the adversarial system, personal opinion, not the best way to deal with the family law. If that's all we have, if that's the step of last resort, okay. but that's the step of last resort, not first resort. So this is where you want to begin the process, and you will all be better off, and on all fronts. And it's usually that assertion alone that gets them to, now I'm obviously passionate about it and have a lot of experience and can tell you many anecdotes.
Is the key, Bill. When we address this in workshops about how to explain to clients the value proposition of doing it this way, the passion is the key. People who speak the way you do about how dramatically better off you're going to be, and oh, by the way, parenthetically, you'll also spend less, but that's not what we emphasize. And when the passion about this being really worthwhile in a profound way is expressed, clients hear it and they're guided by it. The important thing, Tasha, is that they don't have anything to compare it to. When clients think that it's too expensive, what I always do first is say, compared to what? And then we have the conversation about what they think they know and what I know and they don't. And Bill knows and they don't, about what happens if you make that other choice. They don't know and we do. And we have a duty to let them know. But we're going to move on now, because that's a perpetual question, and there are good answers to it. You need to get a workshop in your community about how to answer it the way Bill just did. I want to turn to Linda's question, which is directly to Bill. When people have brought seminars to parallel advisors, how long are those seminars? In other words, how big a job is it going to be for a practice group to put together a nice little slide deck and take it to people like you?
Yeah, great question. We're all tired of people on television saying, great question, every time somebody gets asked a question, but it's a great question. So almost all of these, the way we organize our firm, and I think virtually all firms are this way, is we typically block an hour. And the most effective ones are really where there's a 20, 25, 30-minute presentation. But, you know, if you could get through the bullet points in less time than that and allow more time for questions, that's good. The more people interact, because that'll stimulate them to bring up the, oh, you know, I had this, what do I do? But, you know, that sort of thing. Because once you've created that kind of interest and dialogue, they're not going to walk away knowing what to do and how to do it. And they're not going to be able to repeat everything. They're not going to be trained at the end of this. They're just going to know this is the first step. And before you do the next thing, they pull this thing off their desk or out of their drawer and say, here's, you know, because the question we get asked is, to whom should I go? They don't typically come to me and say, you know, how should I negotiate my divorce? It turns out I know a lot and I can help. But they come to me and say, this is happening, now what? So all I need is your name, your practice group, info at, whatever that is. This is where you start the process. This is where, stop everything else, go here first. So you just need people to walk away with the, I know this works. They don't have to be able to explain it the first time or the first 5 times that they've been engaged. They just need to know where to direct people.
Thanks, Bill. I'm looking to see if we have other questions. Yeah, we do have other questions. Let's go here.
Yes, John, I'll be there wherever you are.
Anne Bouchot, who's in my own practice community here in Marin County, says, now that we're all on Zoom, couldn't we do a webinar about collaborative practice for wealth managers all over California, US, or the world? And I love the way you think the way I like to think. How can we find the values-driven wealth managers? If we reach out to firms like Merrill Lynch, rather than individual wealth managers? Is that a good way? Well, I don't recommend individuals, although it's not a bad thing to do. The firms, well, Bill, how many people are there in your firm, for example?
So I never keep track. I mean,
roughly.
There's a lot of people, but there's, let's say 25, 30 advisors. We're growing fairly quickly. So and we're spread around geographically as well. And so that number will be, you know, could be higher this week for all I know. But my comment is, particularly if you're looking at those bigger firms, when you get into bigger firms, there's going to be a point of contact who's trying to triage this kind of data for all of the advisors, because there may be hundreds of advisors in that region of Merrill Lynch, for instance. So I think that's the person where there's going to be good contact made. And typically, if you go searching for them on the web, that's the name you'll find, because the individual advisors don't want you to bother them. necessarily, or the firm doesn't want you to know about them directly. They want to filter the information. When you're in the more independent channel, as I have described, some firms that have scale like ours, there is a point contact person. But I would also note that when somebody really gets the bit on this, the way I got the bit on this and the way many of my other colleagues, I have colleagues who now virtually don't do anything but this. They spend all of their time with the family bar. When people get that, when they take the bit like that and really see the value, they're going to be the internal champion. So if you find somebody coming across the transom that's really interested and seeking you out, or this is a little bit off of where Pauline's headed, but that's been my experience, that they then become a good advocate for this whole process.
Well, one comment, Bill, is from John Susko, who says, "Can I adopt you, Bill?"
Yeah, I said, yes, John. Tell me where you live. I'll be there.
Rachel Hernandez asked if there are specific topics that would be good to give presentations on, or is it better to give a general overview? And Linda asks if a 3-person team is more effective than just one presenting a little presentation to a wealth management group.
I think it can be either, but I really like this idea of specific topics. I think that's a nice drill down. Obviously, most people need to have a general overview because they're just not familiar. But as you start to drill down a little bit with, examples, for instance, let's talk about tax. So tax is the #1 burden for an investor, and how this income is received. And obviously there's a lot of change in this area of the law, but getting clients focused on the after-tax content of their settlement and their future is critical. And then obviously, imagine all the child support issues and all the other things that could go on, because particularly as you see divorce in younger people, that's more of an issue. So I think there are good follow-up. Obviously, I would start with a general overview and engage people at that level, but I would hit on a number of the specifics that people can then drill down into. For instance, tax being an obvious one. You'll find complex questions will be brought to bear because people have often been sitting with them and didn't know how to answer them, and now they're like, "Hey, what do I tell the such and such person?" So I think there's actually options there for follow up. Go back in 6 months. It's some of this is just frame of mind. It's just staying current. It's just reminding people, as we used to say when we were in education, tell people what you're trying to teach them, repeat what you told them, and then tell them again. And then you might get some, then they might really get it. So it's not only done and done typically.
It's not only the content, but also that's how you build relationship. If you keep coming back every 6 months or so, offering more value, then your collaborative practice group has built a huge amount of relational capital with that entire group of wealth managers. That's golden, don't you think?
Yeah, no question.
I think that we may have come to, oh no, there's a couple more. Let's see. You have got my email in the chat panel. We're reopening our attention to the chat panel. You can find my email address there. I plan to email that resources slide to everybody who registered for this webinar. I think I have all your email addresses from Zoom. Bill's email address is on that slide. It's william.clements@paralleladvisors.com, but you better look at it because you want to make sure you spell it right. Rachel says that this series is a good idea. Thank you. I'm asking if you will, if you have a chance, all of you to go to your chat panel. And if you'd like to give Bill and me just a very brief bit of feedback about whether this kind of webinar, this kind of approach to making collaborative practice visible everywhere, is this helpful to you? Are you getting tools here that you think you might be able to use, tools and perspectives? Yeah, my email is in the chat box. It's up above at 10:49 a.m. in the chat column. You'll find my email address there. Okay, I think that's it for today. This is our very first Integrative Law Institute Online Academy webinar, and you folks have been the first participants. So I thank you for being so enthusiastic in coming here and listening to what we have to offer. Bill, anything you want to close with?
Just great. Good on you for doing this work. The world needs this work. This is the law needs a lot of transformation. It's great it's starting here because this is probably the area that's most in need. So bless you for doing the work. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks so much for being our first guest. It's been great.
My pleasure. Have a great day. Adios.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us in this recorded program presented by the Online Academy of the Integrative Law Institute at Commonweal, known as ILI. You'll find many more webinars, video workshops, and conversations on our website. But even better, subscribe to ILI's YouTube channel for early access to cutting-edge video programming made specifically for conflict resolution professionals. Our programs are either free or priced very affordably, but the production costs run high in both time and money. So if you like this program, please help us produce more high-quality videos like it by making a tax-deductible contribution today to the Integrative Law Institute. Thank you.